I'm saying, so your plan for this election was to come to women and say, forget the economy, forget immigration. Roe v. Wade was overturned. It's now a states' right issue as opposed to a federal issue. You thought that was going to be enough? You thought it was going to be enough for you to look at black men and say to black men, you're misogynistic and chauvinistic, and that's the reason why you're not voting for Kamala Harris? You thought it was going to be enough for the Latinos to bring up immigration when you're not paying attention enough that the Cubans think different than the Dominicans, and the Dominicans and the Cubans think different than the Colombians, and they think different than the Venezuelans and the Guatemalans and the Puerto Ricans and the Mexicans, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of these Latinos in America want the...
The tension was electric from the start. Neither of them held back as they ripped into the Democratic Party for pushing woke politics and reckless strategies that, in their view, sent the party spiraling. Stephen A. didn't mince words, slamming the DNC for spotlighting Kamala Harris, calling a major miscalculation. Maher, once a proud liberal voice, now sounded like someone betrayed by the very movement he defended for years. This exchange wasn't just heated, it was explosive.
My point at the end of this thing Friday is that I'm pissed at the Democrats because my issues, democracy, the environment, have no protectors now. Because you blew the election, I have nobody standing up for the two issues that are my issues.
Which is?
Democracy and the environment, to my two most important issues. Those are not priorities in the new administration.
Okay.
In fact, they're antagonistic to both of them. So I have no champion in Washington. They have the courts, they have the House and the Senate, and you totally left me unguarded.
Maher's outrage at the DNC was raw and unfiltered. He blamed them for losing the election and, in his eyes, endangering democracy itself. His frustration is understandable, watching his party unravel. But the outrage feels misplaced. What democracy is he mourning exactly? Trump stepped aside peacefully after 2016. If Maher's referencing lawsuits against media, that's a separate issue entirely. Outlets like 60 Minutes acted more like Kamala's PR team, polishing her image through selective editing. Trump was right to push back. And late-night hosts like Colbert and Kimmel spent years turning their platforms into non-stop anti-Trump attacks. You can't call it a threat to democracy when accountability finally lands.
Here's my issue, generally speaking. We can talk to the economy, immigration, crime in the streets, blah, blah, blah. Here's my ultimate issue. The arrogance of the Democratic Party.
I'm saying the same thing.
Arrogance, we're saying the same thing in two different ways. The arrogance of the second Democratic Party. So, Biden doesn't decide to run for re-election. You grease the skid so he doesn't have to go through a primary. June 27th, he shows up and he embarrasses himself. And it positions naturally for the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, to ultimately ascend and become the Democratic nominee. But the last time we saw her in a primary, she couldn't make it to Iowa. Did you really think that was going?
Stephen A. wasn't shocked. He'd seen this political collapse coming from miles away. To him, the DNC's fall wasn't sudden. It was a train wreck in slow motion. He argued Biden should have stepped aside long before the damage was irreversible. All the warning signs were there. Sinking approval ratings, fading enthusiasm, and a leadership too scared to face the truth. Instead of holding a real primary and giving voters a choice, the DNC handed the nomination to Kamala Harris like it was preordained. No competition, no debate, no vision. Stephen's message was sharp. This wasn't betrayal. It was neglect. The Democrats didn't lose by accident. They lost because they refused to learn.
What you did. Did you discuss the economy enough? No. You could have discussed the border because unlike Obama, who was quote unquote the deporter in chief, according to the Republicans, because he deported more immigrants than Trump did.
According to not just Republicans, but Democrats. There were Democrats who called him that.
He deported more immigrants than Trump, which means he just didn't talk about it, but he did.
Stephen A. didn't stop at leadership failures. He tore into the DNC's hypocrisy on immigration. He reminded everyone that under Obama, deportations hit historic highs. Back then, Democrats called it strong leadership. But when Trump's eyes did the same thing, suddenly it was cruelty. The party flipped its stance overnight, not out of compassion, but for political theater. They weren't fighting for immigrants. They were fighting for optics. Stephen A. exposed the double standard clearly. When Obama acts, it's leadership. When Trump acts, it's evil. The DNC's immigration stance isn't about principle. It's about power and pretending to care when the cameras roll.
Walks in the office and day one you sign an executive
Day
order
one.
that opens the border, and you let more than 12 million immigrants cross the border illegally, and you don't think that's going to be a problem? You knew that the governors DeSantis and in Florida, Abbott in Texas, and others were going to sit up there and attack sanctuary cities by busing these immigrants to your city since you had no problem with it. You were ill prepared to.
The Biden administration wasn't ready for the crisis it created. Democrats may deny it, but the facts are stubborn. By dismantling border protections and ignoring immigration laws, they opened the gates to chaos, not compassion. Southern communities were stretched thin, law enforcement overwhelmed, and the entire system buckled. This wasn't oversight. It was deliberate policy. Now Trump is left to clean the disaster. From border overcrowding to trafficking surges, it all traces back to leadership failures. Stephen A. wasn't exaggerating. He was pointing at an uncomfortable truth. The DNC built this crisis, then pretended it didn't exist.
But your plan for this election was to come to women and say, forget the economy, forget immigration. Roe v. Wade was overturned. It's now a states' right issue as opposed to a federal issue. You thought that was going to be enough? You thought it was going to be enough for you to look at black men and say to black men, you're misogynistic and chauvinistic, and that's the reason why you're not voting for Kamala Harris? You thought it was going to be enough for the Latinos to bring up immigration when you're not paying attention enough that the Cubans think different than the Dominicans, and the Dominicans and the Cubans think different than the Colombians, and they think different than the Venezuelans and the Guatemalans and the Puerto Ricans and the Mexicans, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of these Latinos in America want the borders closed.
Instead of listening to real Americans, the DNC chased applause with hollow promises. They crafted policies around what they assumed voters wanted, not what they actually needed. That arrogance cost them everything. While Democrats were lecturing, Trump was listening. He tapped into 4 core concerns: the economy, immigration, security, and national strength. He didn't dismiss voters. He connected with their frustrations. Meanwhile, the DNC stayed stuck in its echo chamber, blind to the storm outside.
Pay attention to that. You're from California. You were a district attorney here. You were a state attorney general here. You were a senator representing here. And you didn't know that the Latinos were going to say, yo, we don't like open borders. You didn't know that?
Yeah,
And so I'm looking at it and I'm saying all of these things are going on. All of these things are going on. And your argument essentially was, you didn't say it, but this is essentially your argument. It's her turn. It's her turn.
The Democrats ran on entitlement, not vision. Instead of presenting bold policies, they told voters to back Kamala Harris simply because it was her turn. That's not leadership. That's entitlement. There was no compelling economic plan, no real border solution, no fresh energy. And when anyone dared to question her, they were branded sexist or misogynistic. It wasn't about competence anymore. It was identity politics on full display. Voters wanted results, not guilt trips. And when the DNC treated her campaign like a coronation, it blew up in their face. You can't demand loyalty. You have to earn it.
Republicans don't play that. They say, hell with all of that, whose turn it is. We want him. Who do the Democrats want? If you ask them today, they still don't know. They said Kamala because it was too late to say anybody else. But you didn't know who they would say if there was a primary.
And also because the Democratic Party is ideologically captured by identity politics.
I'm totally with you 1,000%. Listen, I'm a big Bill, just so you know, I'm a fiscal conservative. I'm a social liberal. Live and let live, bro.
And a freak in the sheets.
You know what I'm saying?
If you're 50,
I do try.
give us a call.
I do try, no doubt. But here's the deal, man. Listen, I'm a social liberal. And what I mean by that is gay rights, absolutely. Transgender rights and all this stuff. I got no issues with you. I don't want anybody. I'm a black man. I don't want anybody's civil rights violated. I don't want anybody being persecuted in the streets of America. I don't want you being mistreated. I don't want you being denied the same rights that I have. That's fine. But the Democrats took it too.
Stephen and Maher nailed it. The DNC drowned itself in identity politics. Yes, inequality is real, but replacing merit with tokenism isn't progress. It's weakness. Scrapping standards and promoting people based on optics rather than ability doesn't empower communities. It undermines institutions. Excellence built this country, not quotas. Pretending that gender or race automatically equals leadership isn't progress. It's regression. Their obsession with image over substance damaged the party from within.
Just about their rights. You wanted folks to like and embrace and accept everything. Excuse me. There are some people that, guess what? They might watch prostitution, but they ain't with them. Strippers, but they ain't messing. It's all right. Do you? But I don't want it in my face. You got people that think like that, and knowing that that's the reality, and knowing that that doesn't even make up 1% of the population, you are caught on tape, if you're Kamala Harris, saying, quote, I'm for transgender operations for prisoners? You didn't think Trump was going to use that?
Far-left ideology sounds noble on the surface, but collapses under reality. Societies need boundaries, share values, and moral lines. Yet the far left keeps pushing beyond reason, like the reckless push to let minors undergo irreversible gender surgeries. That's not compassion. It's dangerous. Children are still figuring out who they are. Crossing these moral lines isn't justice. It's chaos. Stephen and Maher's warning was clear. When ideology replaces common sense, society pays a price. Some boundaries exist for a reason.
This is why I say, I voted for Kamala Harris, but I can't deny that strictly from a campaign perspective, Bill, he was the better candidate because he played to his constituents.
In their defense, they had a meeting and they decided that free for murderers was a good slogan.
Okay. And where did that get them? Because in the end, when you're trying to pay your bills,
but here's the
and you got peace in the streets that you're worried about, you're not going for that.
Here's the silver lining.
You're trying to win.
I think the election showed we're much less racially tribal than we thought we were. I mean, Trump is a strange guy to bring together all these different coalitions, but he won Latino men.
13%. They said it was a 13% jump.
Oh, okay. Well, whatever it was.
And a 5% jump in the black vote, and even more of that amongst black men.
Trump didn't hide behind polished speeches. His message was simple and real. He connected with working-class Americans who felt abandoned for years. They didn't want perfection. They wanted safety, jobs, and secure borders. And he delivered in their eyes. While the media mocked his bluntness, people saw results. Economic growth, safer streets, and a stronger global stance. Meanwhile, the DNC wrapped itself in empty slogans and ignored the real struggles. Maher and Stephen said what millions believe. Democrats lost not because Trump beat them, but because they abandoned reality for arrogance. Until they start listening instead of lecturing, they'll keep losing the people they claim to fight for.